walking through the front door and often not knowing what you were going to be met with, self-harming and sort of committing.
When was actually the moment you realised no one is going to provide for me?
He's my child. I've chosen to have him. It's not anybody else's responsibility.
Did you also have the feeling that you needed to prove yourself?
You've ruined your life then, haven't you? He said out loud what I thought everybody was thinking.
What is the cost of that laser focus?
I've got a choice to accept that or to be angry and bitter. Every day you can choose to wake up and be a victim. Teenage mums are probably the category of people that are most full of potential.
She became a mom before she even knew who she was, growing up fast, learning on the way, while everybody around her had something to tell her. Later in life, she became one of the top women in one of the big 4 accounting firms. And this is a spot that only a handful of people on the planet will ever reach. From being a teenage mom to reinventing herself, this is Victoria Price in her side of the stories. Welcome!
I'm just so happy to be here.
I made it!
I made it.
Yes, you made it. Oh, I'm so happy you made the effort to come. It just means everything to us.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm going to throw you immediately into the deep. If there was one little sentence underneath your name, and I'm not talking about a title, what would that be?
Oh, one sentence. Okay, let me craft it. But I think it would have to be something about Victoria Price, driven with compassion.
That's beautiful. Almost like you thought about it. So can we go back to where you're from? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so from the UK, I was born in Chester, which I always say to everybody, it's like I become a tourist guide, but it really is a beautiful city because it's got Roman architecture, it's got Tudor
architecture, really?
It's got the largest amphitheatre outside of mainland Europe. So there you go, interesting fact there. But it's a really special city, and I think to grow up there I felt really lucky because it's that nice balance between there's enough going on but at the same time you've got space, it feels very safe, etc. So yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world.
And if you have to imagine your childhood, what feeling does the word home trigger?
It's quite mixed for me. I'm a very positive person, that's the first thing. So everybody always says I wake up with a smile on my face, and I genuinely do. And I think I've been like that my whole life, which is probably for the best. When I think of what home was during childhood, there are loads of happy memories. You know, there's memories with, my brother tipping out a Lego box and playing for hours, and my grandma was a massive kind of part of my childhood and somebody that just kind of really nurtured me and made me feel really special from a young age. But I think it probably wasn't without its challenges as well. And so that feeling of kind of walking through the front door and often not knowing what you were going to be met with from an atmosphere in the house, that was something that was quite normal for me.
What was it caused by, that atmosphere?
I think, my mum, by her own admission, would say that she struggled quite a lot with mental health issues. And so she was just a very volatile person. And by volatile, I mean emotionally volatile, not violent, to be clear. So she could be, at some points really kind of very loving and high energy and doing all sorts of great activities. She was a teacher actually, so she was quite good at being inventive with painting with our feet in the garden, or those kind of like good fun things. But equally she could be a wreck and sobbing, and it was very difficult.
It's very manic, if you will.
Very manic, yeah. And eventually she left, and so
how old were you when she left?
So I was in my teens, but my sister was very young, and that, as the eldest, just completely changed the dynamic. So then home, for me, really became a place of responsibility because I kind of picked up the nurturing role of my younger siblings, but also I basically became a bit of a housewife to my dad, so I did all the cooking, I did all the cleaning, I did all of the kind of like household logistics.
That's a lot for someone that age, isn't it?
But again, but maybe it's just my positive nature, but I still look back on my childhood and I can 100% draw out all of the positives. And I had very close relationships, say with my dad and with my grandma. So I wouldn't create the impression that it was horrific, but it definitely was a childhood where I had to grow up very, very quickly.
And do you remember the moment that you actually thought, okay, the energy is a bit off?
It was from the beginning. So I think my...
So as far as you remember?
As far as I can remember. So, one of my earliest memories, probably when I was about 4 years old, was, a very difficult incident that involved my mum. She was suicidal. She was, quite hysterical. That kind of thing, sticks in your mind. And so I'd say,
of course,
whilst it was never constant, because mental health is never a constant state.
No.
It was punctuated by these really awful periods that then, once they disappeared, you didn't talk about afterwards. But
is that how they dealt with it? You don't talk about it?
But as a child, you fear, am I going to come in and something bad's going to have happened?
Of course you do, yeah.
It definitely was a challenge. And really that was consistent all the way until she left. She suffered really badly with postnatal depression, which back 40 odd years ago, it wasn't very well understood as a condition. And so, it was almost kind of like, pull yourself together, and what have you got to be complaining about? You've got beautiful, healthy children and so on. But obviously, I would say dispassionately, because now I'm a long way away from those memories.
Yeah.
If you saw somebody struggling the way that my mum did at the time, you would now want to step in and make sure that they got the help that she very clearly needed. And then the flip side to it is, as a child growing up in that environment, the fact that it wasn't her fault that she needed support, it doesn't make it any less of a difficult thing to live through.
What was the sense you were making of it yourself?
I think I felt a bit of a responsibility to, is it something that we're doing? Like, how can I make us be good so that mum's okay? And you kind of like carry that burden of feeling like it's something that you're doing as the children that's tipping her over the edge and causing her to lock herself away, or causing her to say that she wants to sort of leave the home, or, those kind of things, that as a roller coaster of different things that you would be dealing with, and her sort of self-harming and sort of committing, trying to sort of take her own life and so on. It was a regular occurrence throughout our childhood. So.
Was it also something you were witnessing literally?
Yeah.
And how was it explained to you?
It wasn't really. No, I mean, again, go back, it's 40 odd years ago. So, my dad, who's passed away now, but, he was a professional. He was out the house from 7 in the morning until at least, 7 at night really was his, well, probably 6:30 in the morning till 6:30. That was kind of 12 hours he's out of the house. And as a child, that's the hours you're awake.
Definitely.
So you're witnessing a huge amount of stuff
and your
that's
mum was
going
at home.
on. My mum was at home. So you're kind of witnessing all of that. And then when it would be dealt with, it would be dealt with behind closed doors. And so then nobody would come and say, oh, just so you know, this is what's going on, and, whatever. You just would... It almost that kind of sitting, we had these stairs that went round, and, sometimes you'd creep down and sort of try and listen to what's going on and what's happening and what's going to happen now, because you sort of had that feeling inside something bad's happened.
And what kind of feelings was it triggering?
It's what now you would describe as anxiety. It's that you can't quite put your finger on it. So it's not...
You don't have the tools as a kid.
No, and it's not a known, this is what I'm feeling. It's that, almost gripping inside of something's not quite right here, but I'm not really sure what it is. And I think probably as the eldest, I took a lot of responsibility for trying to make sure that we did everything that we could to minimise ourselves and, make sure that we didn't cause any trouble. And then, as you get older, you reflect on it and you see it really, really differently. And for definite, I went through a period of being really angry about it and feeling like, my childhood had been stolen a bit by it, and, all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's a very natural reaction, isn't it?
But you get older, you get a broader perspective on mental health, and, you look back and think that, probably my mum was let down by lots of healthcare professionals around her that just didn't take things seriously or didn't really realise what she was going through. And I think, my dad probably could have done more as much as I loved him, but I don't think he knew where to start. And it's kind of easier to go out as a man and be out of the house all day working when there's problems at home and not facing it, which is a way to survive, but it doesn't really deal with the problem.
No, exactly. It doesn't solve anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So was she repeatedly also saying, "I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave"?
It was a mixture. So you know, on any given occasion, it could be right. That's it. I'm packing my stuff. You know, I can't do this anymore. I'm going. And you know, we'd be like, "Mom, don't leave, please. We love you. We want you to stay." Or you know, it might be kind of locking herself up, or just not coming home, or you know, she did disappear for periods of time, and then eventually she just left and disappeared, and we didn't know where she'd gone at all.
Wow. So actually, before she left, is it right to say that you were already parenting?
Yes. Yeah.
Even her?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a very good cook.
Let's try. We shall see tonight.
But yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so basically at that moment of time, at some point when you were early teens, she did leave.
Yeah.
What happened then? Why did she leave? What was the trigger?
Looking back, I mean, it's her story to tell, not mine. But I think the trigger was actually really trivial in the end. It was just that thing that tipped her over the edge. And I think often when something's dealt with within a household, everybody doesn't talk about it, everybody hides it, and the person at the centre of it almost feels that they save face because the outside world doesn't know what's going on. And when there's an event and almost other people get to see a bit of the crazy that's going on, that's very confronting. And I think my mum then felt exposed and embarrassed. And
is that what happened? There was a proper event?
Yeah. And so at that point, she sort of disappeared, and that was that for many years.
And when did you spoke with her again?
It was years later. I would struggle to tell you exactly when. At the time, it felt like forever, but it was probably about 3 years or something. But until we spoke, it was longer until we saw each other. But it felt like forever at the time. And obviously, in the first kind of part, you don't realise that it's going to be permanent, because it was permanent. She never came back even to the area. So she'd actually moved to the south of England and, you know, never lived with us again, and never kind of came back and played a big sort of feature in our lives from that point onwards. But you don't know that is going to be the outcome. So you're kind of part hoping that she's going to come back, and there's a bit of uncertainty, and, you know, you wait and see if she phones up on Christmas Day, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff was going on in the early years. But definitely your mind plays tricks on you a bit, because you know, you kind of think, oh, it's a decade. I did hear from her, but it was very sporadic, and you probably sort of block it out a little bit, I think.
Yeah, of course. And what was your dad saying to you guys? Was he trying to justify it, or was it again not being spoken about?
Dad was really, when it came to, so get him talking about football or cricket, he could talk all day. But about things like that, you know, it was less is more, you know, and he didn't really go into any detail. He didn't really change his routine at all. You know, he still got up and went to work and came home when he came home, and life kind of carried on.
So almost ignoring the whole event.
Yeah. And he never really, you know, he didn't really react. So, you know, he didn't cry, or he didn't, you know, scream and shout, or
difficult as well that you don't have actually the capability to show your emotions.
I think it was almost just, well, we must carry on. You know, it was that kind of thing. And I mean, I was always very close to my dad, and it was almost just another thing that, oh, well, it's kind of us against everybody else. And, you know, we'll make sure that we continue to sort of do good meals, and we continue to do, you know, this, that and the other. And I don't know if he maybe thought that she would come back in the earlier days, and, you know, she did. And I would say definitely he probably would have been happy to kind of reconcile, but obviously it wasn't to be. So. And
what did it change in the household, other than, because the routine stayed the same?
Yeah.
But was there something different?
If I'm really honest, and I felt guilty for this as a child, but now I don't, because again, it's just back to that sort of self-preservation. It actually took a whole host of the stress out of the household, which is a terrible thing to say, because you've kind of now, you've not got somebody that really you feel should be a key part of your childhood. But the reality of it is that it was such a disruptive influence, and it was an unpredictability that even in adulthood, I struggled to cope with people that are like that, but, you know, in close quarters, because it can affect the mood of the house just like that. And I appreciate peacefulness, and, you know, I don't like it when there's lots of emotional volatility. So actually for me there was definitely an overwhelming sense of relief. And then at points you might have felt a little bit sorry for yourself, and, you know, a bit sad.
Of course, we all do.
And I think, again, with the benefit of hindsight, I stepped up again and probably took on even more responsibility and grew up even faster. And, you know, you almost just start behaving like an adult way before your time.
You have to,
because there's just stuff that needs doing, and, you know, you can't just sit there in that kind of household where there isn't any adult at home for long periods of time and sort of not step into that. So it was just almost the next stepping stone of me.
Responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility, yeah.
And then there was another one coming next, wasn't there?
I know. As if I hadn't already had enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So quite early on, you became a mommy. So when did that relationship start?
I'll kind of set the context for it in my own words, maybe, but I think what happens when you're in that environment and you're almost living a life of an adult is you find it quite difficult to relate to kids that are your own age, because
of course you do,
they're kind of out partying, or they're, you know, doing whatever it is that they're doing,
and their issues are very different than yours.
And I'm going grocery shopping and coming home and doing a, you know, 2-course meal for 4 people every night, and ironing for a family, and taking my little sister to parents' evening, and, you know, so on and so forth. So I think as I ended up, you know, in sixth form, I kind of found that I was relating more to people that were older, which is probably not much of a surprise. And it gave me a little breakaway from the house to have somewhere else that I could go with some people that had their own houses, and, you know, it felt more relatable. And so going over and cooking dinner with somebody, or, you know, those kind of things, that was what I was doing at home anyway. So it didn't feel old, it just sort of felt that's the stage that I'm at, that's kind of normal. So I met somebody when I was in sixth form, and as obviously you know, I ended up getting pregnant with Ben, and it's to me it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And, you know, I obviously had a choice, do I have him, don't I have him? And for me, I'm just very pro-life, and from the second that I found out that I was having him, I was so excited to be a mum, and it was never, you know, something that I saw in a negative light in any way, shape or form. It's not how other people felt about it, but for me, it was something that from the beginning, it was really obvious that
it was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing for me. So we weren't together in the sense of trying to raise a child together. I raised Ben.
Did you not want to be involved?
No, it's not that. It's just that we were never going to be together.
Sure.
And so,
I mean, how can you? I mean, what are the odds?
Yeah, exactly. And that was apparent, you know, from the beginning. So he's got a great relationship with Ben. That's his own relationship, but it's not our relationship. You know, we obviously speak and but it was for me, it didn't feel such a shock to the system as it might have done if I was a typical 17-year-old.
Yeah, of course, because you were kind of like living that life already anyway.
Yeah. But
how was it becoming a mom so young?
I would say it's really complex, and what you realise is how different people judge a scenario, and how opinionated, even now, even when you sort of, you know, hear of somebody that's had a baby young and you watch people having an opinion on it, it's very, very strange, especially given
often negative as well.
Yeah, very negative, but given globally the different variety of ages that people have children, it is really interesting. So
the people look down, you know, like bluntly said, on very young
100%.
moms.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel really passionately about, that, you know, it's wrong to misjudge people, because you can have amazing mums who are teenage mums and bring so much energy and love and kind of warmth to things, and then you can have mums that on paper everything's right, you know, they've got the house, they've got the finances, they've got a few more years and whatever. It doesn't make a good mum or a bad mum.
Absolutely.
And I definitely subscribe to the, you know, there's no right time to have a child apart from when they're going to be loved, and if they're brought into the world with love, then that, you know, that's all that you can ask for. My dad was amazing, so I was very nervous about
how did you tell him?
Oh my God. So like, set a bit of context. So I was like a straight A student at school, and to go home before I'd sat my A levels. And honestly, one of the biggest gifts that he ever gave me was, first thing he said, no kind of messing around and getting to it. He said, "You're going to be an amazing mum." First thing he said.
Oh, I got a goosebump.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
And I look back now and I think, you know, you've obviously met my daughter, she's 20, and I think if she told me she was pregnant, would the first thing, I'd say, "Kate, you're a calamity." I'd be like, "You can't even look after yourself. What do you mean that you're a mum?" You know, so I look back and I think, like, I really have never had the opportunity to ask my dad.
But he must have respected you a lot.
Yeah, I think he thought I was capable.
Yeah.
And so that meant a lot to me. The rest of the world, not so much. So
what were the reactions you were getting?
So I had to leave school because I went to an all-girls school.
Because of it?
Yeah. So they were a bit concerned that I'd bring the reputation of the school down.
Really? Was that the reason?
Yeah.
Wow.
So obviously that presented challenges because I wanted to carry on my education and so on. But it was a bizarre thing. So I think with friends my own age, there was an immediate curiosity that grew off very quickly. So there was a novelty of, you know, oh my gosh, like somebody's pregnant, da la la la. But actually they were busy doing what young people should be doing. And so they were enjoying their last years of school, they were going off to uni, they were traveling, they were partying, they were whatever. And so even with the best intentions on both sides, it is one of those sliding doors moments where my life went in one direction and theirs went another way. So I would say that was almost the final, it was like the severance really of me having much in common with the majority of people my own age.
Because you didn't have a lot in common anyway.
Exactly. So you then go to the mother and baby groups, and there is a happy ending to this. But what you realise kind of quite quickly is the judgment that comes. So I lived in quite a nice area. You know, I would walk to go to my antenatal classes, for example, and everybody else would be turning up in their Range Rovers or whatever the equivalent was kind of 20 years ago. And there was a real kind of like, oh, right, she's the teenage mum in the group type of thing. And that exclusion, it was like palpable. You know, you could feel that people would identify people as, oh, that's my kind of person. Yeah, she looks like she's turned up in a nice car. She looks like she's popped out to this antenatal appointment from work. Oh, she's kind of, you know, a bit young, and I really felt that. I also really felt it, you know, bearing in mind that I am bright. I was actually at the time studying sciences for A levels, and, you know, and you can, even healthcare professionals, you know, it's important that you take folic acid. What folic acid, you know, and it was almost kind of like cringy, because of how much they would patronise me. But at the time, you didn't feel that you had the voice to say, I know I look like this, and I know my date of birth is that, but actually I've already researched all of this. And, you know, back then it wasn't even like Google. It was, I've gone to the library, I've got the books, I've read the books, I know what I'm doing already, I feel. But I definitely didn't have the confidence to push back on that at the time.
And what was it triggering that misjudgment?
To be honest, it was just like, you watch me. Like, you watch me, because almost the more that people made assumptions, the more that I became determined that I
So it was fueling your ambition.
Definitely. And then, happiest of things, so I met this amazing group of women, and we laughed. There's a funny story, actually. So we call it like the antenatal group. So there's 6 of us, and we became really, really good friends. And they were really like my lifeline, because I didn't have a mum around. I didn't have any friends that had children. Obviously, my dad was out at work all day, and it could have just been so isolating. And we sort of formed this little group, and every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, we'd kind of go to each other's houses, and we'd sit there breastfeeding, and depending on whose house we were at, somebody'd make a cake and all the rest of it.
And you still the social aspect as well.
Yeah, and we would share really the trials and tribulations of, you know, I can't get them to sleep, or as they got even into toddler ages, you know, when they were having tantrums. And it was just a sounding board that normalised absolutely everything. And one of my...
So you found your community there?
Found my little group. And so even now, they're the antenatal group, and they go in my diary once a month. We kind of like have a meal or whatever. And it's it's maybe not quite once a month now, because I travel so much, but it's not far off. And it's in the diary as the antenatal group.
Amazing.
And my secretary phoned me up, this is probably about 2 years ago, and she's like, I think you've got an appointment in your diary that you might want to make private. And I was like, no, I don't, because my diary's open. Like I always say to everybody, like, well, it's normal to have a life. So if it's in the diary, people at work can see what I'm doing. There's nothing to hide. And she's like, no, I think on Friday you might just want to put that to private. And I was like, on Friday? I'm not doing anything on Friday. So I went in and opened, and it was like antenatal group like this. And so there's this kind of like rumour had gone around that I was like obviously pregnant and going to... I was like, absolutely
that's so
not.
Funny.
Absolutely not.
You had something to explain.
Yeah, exactly. So it's antenatal banter, and we still, like, they're all 25 now, and we still meet up, and it's just been a really, really good friendship group.
Stories have the power to reach people in ways nothing else can. Every week on Her Side of the Stories, I sit with women that have lived through experiences that shaped them. And every time I get reminded to how powerful it is when we start opening up. Have you lived through something that can really help someone? Or do you know someone that had lived through something that really should be heard? I would like to hear from you. Go to www.hersideofthestories.com and tell me a bit about it. Because maybe somewhere on the planet, at this moment of time, there is someone that really should hear your story. Thank you. I've been reading a bit about what it must have been like to have a child at a young age.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was reading about is that a lot of teenagers, when they become moms, postnatal depression actually seems to be a huge thing and punches them much harder than other moms. And actually also knowing a bit of what your mom has been going through. Is that something you've experienced yourself as well?
Do you know, I genuinely, first of all, I think that everybody's mental health, it's luck as to whether it affects you. And I feel that I've been incredibly fortunate to get to this age and to have not had any episodes of challenges with my mental health at all. And that's not
amazing.
That's not because I don't think it might happen in the future, because I know from close to home that it can affect anybody. But when I look back, almost, it's a funny thing that if you kind of imagine me as a new mum in my teens, so I was working to put a roof over our heads and to pay for us to exist because somebody had to pay for us. I was looking after a newborn that was premature, and he had quite high demands because of like how regularly he needed to feed, because he only had a tiny stomach and all the rest of it, and I was studying to do my A-levels. So as much as it sounds like a throwaway thing to say, I was almost too busy to think about how I was feeling. And I just had this real drive, which was, I've got two choices here. My situation is my situation. I'm a mum and I've got somebody to provide for. And I can either, stop where I am today and not carry on growing, in which case our lives aren't going to change materially, or I can look to the future and I can set myself a goal, which at the moment is going to feel like it's a million miles away, and it's going to feel like an absolute slog to get there.
Definitely.
But if I stick to the plan, I will be able to provide something that's better for us. And so I kind of had this goal that by the time Ben went to school, which would have been 4, that he would be no different to the average kid in his class. So I wanted to have bought a house by the time he was 4. I wanted to have kind of qualified in a profession by the time he was 4. I wanted to be earning enough that I wasn't having to worry about running out of money for nappies at the end of the month, which, as much as I was working hard in low-paid jobs, and I've got a huge amount of respect for anybody that does that, because I think if you've never experienced what it's like to earn money the hard way, and you know, by the hard way I mean you're kind of working in a shop on your feet all day every day, and then you go into a second job waiting on in a restaurant or kind of serving or doing whatever, and then you're trying to pick up extra hours doing what, that is a hard way to earn your money. And there
just get around.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, you know, I know the one gift that I've got, and it's not anything I did, I just am intelligent, and I'm not saying that as a brag, I just am. And so I knew that if I carried on with my education, I would be able to pass exams, I would be able to get qualified in something, and I would be able to have a career that would allow me to provide a better life for Ben. So I was really, really fixated on making sure that I didn't just get stuck in a rut where, you know, I actually got offered a job. It was for a charity, and it was to work in their finance team. And at the time, it was a massive elevation from what I was doing, because I'd been doing these low-paid jobs. It was all a bit of a mixture. And this was one full-time job that was probably earning double what the 3 jobs were earning.
Wow.
And I got the job and I didn't take it. And the reason that I didn't take it was because I thought that will solve a today problem. It will mean that
So mature.
Yeah, but it didn't have any prospects. I would have gone in and I would have been stuck in that job, you know, for however long, until I could have got another job without actually having the you know, the education behind me and so on.
To bring you further on the long term.
And I knew that I wanted to do something that gave me a long-term prospect. So yeah,
What triggered those realizations?
I can't really explain it. I was born like it. So, you know, all the way through school, I was, you know, if I was going to do something, I loved school. It was a very safe, happy place for me. I understood what the rules were.
You were thriving.
I was thriving at school. And so I think I just grew up. And it's actually something I've had to relearn, which I will sort of talk about, because for me, I am a hard worker. And so I knew that the combination of hard work and natural talent meant that I would always do well and I would be able to progress. And so,
it was proven at school, so...
Yeah, it was proven at school, so I took it into my higher education. It was proven in my higher education, so I took it into my career. It was proven in my career, so it was the right thing to do. Then you have children. And then children, they're not all the same. And so, you know, I think, sort of assumed that because I was very intelligent and I could get straight A's in every exam that I ever took, and I won prizes when I kind of took my professional exams and all the rest of it, you sort of assume that your children are going to have exactly the same aptitude and that they're going to have the same interest in achieving goals in the same way.
But they're not from the same background as you.
They're not from the same background. And so, but the other thing that was, I suppose, as I got older, you start to come into contact with a wider group of people from different backgrounds. And you see people having success in loads of different ways. And, you know, for example, you doing this amazing creative podcast and finding a voice to tell people's stories. It's not because you've kind of followed an academic formula.
No, not at all.
It's because you've been inspired to do something and you've created something.
Yes.
And then I came into contact with loads of people that had founded businesses, and the number of them who were like, yeah, school wasn't for me. I left when I was 15. I had no qualifications, but I've worked really hard and I had an idea.
Shake them the hands, that was a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay, like success looks like lots of different things. And it was kind of at the same time as my children were getting older, and I looked around and there's still lots of people that I think even as parents you feel the pressure to be like, oh yeah, my child got 3 A's at A level, and my child went to this university, and all the rest of it. Well, I had none of that. Like, my dad was just sort of like happy that I was happy, and, you know, even took joy in becoming a granddad way earlier than he would have expected, because he could see that I was happy. And so I've really changed my perspective on it, particularly I'd say over the last decade.
When it comes to school specifically?
Yeah,
or broader?
Just broader. You know, 100% exams are a really important part. And if you've got the academic aptitude, apply yourself. Like, I always say to, you know, the kids, like, you've got all summer to have your best summer ever, knowing that you've got your exams in your back pocket. And once you've got them,
so true,
nobody ever gets to take them away. So don't waste the talent that you've got through stupidity and lack of focus and, you know, whatever. But if actually you decide you don't want to go straight to university, or you want to do something that's a bit more creative, or you want to travel, or you want to take a little bit of a different path, as long as you have got a work ethic and you accept that nobody else is going to provide for you, that you've got to create a life that you are happy with, good for you.
Yeah.
And I think that has definitely been something that I have learned.
I just know that was just when you said that, I thought, oh, I need to ask her. So when was actually the moment you realized no one is going to provide for me? It's just me. I need to man up now.
Oh, I mean, for me, do you know what? Funnily enough, I was having this conversation a few days ago with somebody, and I said I would have been ashamed to ask my dad for money. So when even you know, as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I worked. Now, I'm not trying to say I was like you know, in a mill, kind of like doing cotton, you know, or something like that. But, you know, I did paper rounds, I babysat, I did all those kind of little things that you do at that age to kind of earn money. As soon as I was able to, I went and worked in different shops, and, you know, kind of I earned the money that I needed to do the things that I wanted to do with my friends. When I had Ben, two things that I strongly believed from the very beginning is he's my child. I've chosen to have him. It's not anybody else's responsibility to pay for him. It's not anybody else's responsibility to take care of him. So I always had this thing that, you know, if my grandma would say, do you want me to take Ben out for the afternoon so that you can do some studying, or, you know, whatever. And I'd say, if you want to, I'd love you to. Don't feel like you've got to. Don't let it become a chore. You know, don't let it be something that stops you enjoying your life. And she'd be like, no, I'm taking him. And, you know, off she'd go, and that was great. But I chose to have Ben. It's my responsibility to look after him and to pay for him. And in a million years, I would never have gone to my dad and said, Dad, can you help me financially, because I've got myself in a situation. So I think to be honest, I can't remember not feeling that it was important to be financially independent. And I think, you know, maybe that's a little bit of, from a childhood perspective, don't get me wrong, we weren't poor, but money wasn't in abundance, and I knew that I needed to provide for myself, and that I wanted to work hard so that I could provide the life that I wanted for myself. And the biggest thing for me, you know, the kids at different points. I mean, Kate makes me laugh. I keep talking about her because she's here, but she always says she wants to be a road planner, because she loves like thinking about towns and the way things are planned and all the rest of it. At points, I've thought one of the kids might go into being a personal trainer. They've taken a different path now. Ollie's undecided. I don't mind what they do, as long as they are happy to live the life that they've provided for themselves, because to me,
with that profession,
because to me, the only thing that's unhealthy is to not have a work ethic and to be like, I'm entitled. What is it that I'm going to get from the world? Like that to me is a really alien mindset.
And did you also have the feeling that you needed to prove yourself?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And who did you wanted to prove yourself to?
Everybody. I wanted to prove it to everybody.
I think you did.
Yeah, I remember when I so obviously I left school, and I remember when I got my A-level results, I phoned the school back and I was like, hello, hi, oh yes, can I speak to you forever? And they came on the phone and they were like, sorry, who is this? And I was like, oh, it's Victoria. And they were like, oh, hi, Victoria. And I was like, yeah, just to let you know, these are the A-level results that I got. Obviously, they could have been part of your statistics.
You did that?
I did,
oh,
yeah.
yes.
Of course I did.
That's
of course
amazing.
I did.
Did it feel like revenge?
Yeah, I was like, yeah. And then,
Oh,
but I
nice.
think, I remember once, and he's actually a really lovely guy, and he probably won't even remember, so I'm not going to say his name, but he probably won't even know it's him. But I remember meeting him in town, and I don't know, I was about 6 months pregnant, and so, you know, when it's your first, you're tiny, aren't you? I'm a small person anyway, so nobody knows. And he said something like, you know, oh hi, somebody told me that you're pregnant, and I went, oh yeah, I am. And he goes, oh God, you've ruined your life then, haven't you?
No,
and it was
he didn't
just
say that.
throwaway. But bearing in mind, he was a 17-year-old boy as well. It was somebody in my peer group, but he said out loud what I thought everybody was thinking. And I'm sure there were lots of people that weren't thinking that, but I felt that that's what everybody was thinking. And so I suppose the same way as with school, I kind of set out to be the best mum that I possibly could be. And I took it really, really seriously.
As a mission.
But it brought me a huge amount of joy. And I think for me, it's been a really positive thing because it's given me from a very young age a perspective on what really matters.
Purpose and a goal as well.
A purpose and a goal. And I think it helps keep you in touch with what's important. And you know, I always say it's like you can be...
You made it your superpower.
Yeah. You can be really successful at work, but you can still walk in the house and within 2 minutes somebody's thrown up on you and somebody's having a tantrum on the floor and somebody else is answering you back and not listening to you. And it's a very humanising thing, you know, that it's
humbling.
Yeah, it's very humbling. You might end up having loads of authority and, you know, you go to work and you look like you've got it all together, but actually you go home, you're as rubbish as everybody else. Like the things that go wrong and the things that happen.
Throw up everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Poo on your hands.
Exactly. And I can remember, I always tell this story, and it's like, it's a gross story, but it just sort of like proves the point is that I remember I'd not long gone back to work from maternity leave with it must have been my second, So I'd gone back to work, and you're trying so hard to, like, especially back then, I think even more than now, that you want people to think it hasn't affected you at all. Like, you're still the same person, you're still kind of on it in the same way, you're still delivering to the same level, and Like, the reality of it is, at home, it's chaos.
It's a mess.
You're not sleeping, it's a mess. And I can remember kind of coming home, and I was still wearing this suit, which at the time I was so proud of. I look at the pictures and I think, God, I look older there than I do now. But it was this Marks and Spencer's pale dove grey suit with a pink pinstripe. I absolutely loved it. And I got home, and it was that kind of chaos time where you've got to do, you know, dinner time, bath time, story time, bedtime, and you've got this condensed period.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't had time to change out of my suit. So I'd fed all the kids and whatever in the suit. And then we had a downstairs bathroom at the time, and I'd gone into the bathroom and I was sorting out the baby on the mat and doing whatever. And child number 2, she's going to be mortified about this, just suddenly started going to the toilet over the top of the baby, because she was just stood up by the side of the bath. And so I was like, what do? I either let this happen to my child or I catch it. So I'm in my pinstripe suit, half changing a nappy, just like quickly like caught this. And I was like, okay,
this is my life.
This is a new low point right here. And that was at the time I wouldn't have shared the stories, because I'd be like, this really embarrassed my gravitas if I go into the book. Now I go in and I just like I say it, and I kind of use my platform to try and normalise all of these, just the mental load, the kind of practical burden, like everything that's going on.
Definitely,
because
it's hard. It's hard work.
Really, really hard.
Really hard work.
Really hard work. So yeah, I've had a few moments.
Oh, this is so funny. Another thing I imagine that might have raised some questions at the time is, did you never feel like you missed out?
Good question. No, I didn't. And well, I suppose I saw it more in that sliding doors moments, that my life went one way, other people's lives went another way. And I think I was so busy living my life because it was a very busy life. You know, I was studying, I was working, I was, you know,
You're wearing
after,
5 hats.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was so busy doing all of that, and genuinely took so much joy out of being a mum. So being a mum for me has never been a chore.
So you've never felt resentment?
No, never.
It's such a blessing. What was the cost of it?
If I look back on, let's say, from the ages of, well, 18 through to 25, and you said to me, like, tell me a time unrelated to being a mum where you had a really wonderful experience, or where you learned something that wasn't to do with your profession that really stuck with you, or I would really struggle to kind of tell you anything that sort of...
You were on a mission.
I was on a mission, completely on a mission. And so obviously the flip side of it is that you do end up having children that are much more independent when you still feel quite young.
Yeah.
And so definitely now I can enjoy the relationship that I've got with them, which is great. I can obviously travel and kind of do things much more freely without having to worry about the logistics that maybe other people in their early 40s have got all of that just ahead of them or going on. But sort of people say, oh yeah, it must be great for you because you're so young, you know, your youngest is just about to go to you. I'm like, yeah, it is now, but I never forget how hard it was in the beginning. It was very tiring. It was very demanding. And there is a reason why lots of people do end up just stuck in a rut, and they kind of put their dreams to one side because like they're tired. So yeah.
Yeah. And what is the cost of that laser focus?
I think probably the cost of it is that kind of enrichment of your life. You know, it's the
experiences
that you miss. And yeah, being able to take joy in the journey and yeah, just almost be not to plan, not to micromanage everything so much, where I always kind of felt like you can't afford to make a mistake here, because first of all, there's little people that are relying on you to be able to provide for them, and you know, you are by definition in a position of responsibility, but also there's lots of people that maybe don't believe in you, and you know, you've got to
prove them wrong.
So yeah, for me it is a little bit of that, but you know, on balance, you look back and it's not something that I would change, because I think it's made me who
Sounds like
I am.
a superpower, definitely.
Yeah.
And did you actually have a lot of time to spend with them at all, or was that a luxury?
Yeah, it's really, I always say this as well. So when Ben was born, it was like survival. So you have these three competing things, like time to look after your child, study to provide a better future, and work to deal with the now.
Wow.
And that's a lot to be trying to do all in one go.
For anyone at any
time.
Yeah.
And so at that point in time, I absolutely relied on and couldn't have done it without people that are some of my closest friends today. So my grandma, obviously she's now passed away, but she was the biggest biggest positive female influence in my life. She was amazing. And her generosity towards helping me with Ben was incredible. But it wasn't just her. I had, you know, Dawn, one of my closest friends to this day, and you know, we used to take it in turns looking after each other's children so that we could both go to work or study or whatever. So I had this really supportive little group of women. It was women supporting women who allowed me the space to do some of those things. And I never once felt guilty for leaving Ben, because I was doing it for us. I was doing it so that the future was going to be better, or that, you know, we could afford to eat that month, or whatever it happened to be.
You didn't have a choice.
I didn't have a choice, and I never ever thought about it. So don't get me wrong. Like, to give you one example of how I did it, and I met with him recently. So my first proper boss, he's the guy that gave me my first job in an accountancy firm. And that really changed my life, because up until then, I'd been doing these low-paid jobs and I'd been studying independently. But then I got this opportunity to go and work in a proper accountancy practice, and they paid for my exams, they paid for my study leave. All of this I'd been financing myself from the low-paid job. So it was really like monumental. I went through the interview process, and I said, I've just got a question. Would it be possible for me to work condensed hours? And he was like, what's that? And I said, well, I'd like to work from 7:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock, 4 days a week, so that I can be at home with my son on 3 days. And that was a massive thing for loads of reasons. So first of all, this is 25 years ago. So that wasn't a thing.
No,
like,
not at all.
Flexible working was not an entitlement. It was like, no, it wasn't even a phrase. So, but it also meant that I only had to pay for 4 days of nursery fees. So one of my phrases that everybody says, I say all the time, but I always say, you get more bang for your buck. So I was only paying for 4 days of nursery, earning a 5-day-a-week salary. But it also meant that I had these 3 days of, for me, pure joy of being at home with Ben.
Then it doesn't matter if you work 24 hours.
Exactly. And that's kind of how I did it. And so I was like, I can't be everywhere at the same time.
No, you can't.
I can make some choices about how I spend my time. And I got quite good, quite young, at asking for what I wanted. And he said yes to that. And it was great.
It's a very good trick.
It was the best I could do at that point in time. Then if I roll forward to when I had my last child, like, completely different. So by this point, I'm financially really, really secure. I've got more than I need. I absolutely loved having Ollie. It was just so much more of a luxurious experience. I got to take over a year off maternity leave.
Amazing.
Like with Ben, I was back in school, well, not school, but college, a few weeks after I'd had him. And so with Ollie, I had this kind of lovely long period of time. And then when I went back to work, I actually nearly didn't go back, because I didn't need to. And I was kind of
enjoying yourself so much.
I was enjoying myself so much, and I had choices. I could go back 2 days a week, I could go back 3 days a week, I could go back full time. And I agonised over what the right thing to do. And it's the first time that I felt mum guilt, because before then, in survival mode, you don't have time to stop and think about being guilty.
It's almost pathetic then.
You're just like, I've got to survive.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly have got the luxury of choice, and then that choice becomes really difficult, because for women who are knocking it out of the park professionally, who can afford to have support around them, who can afford to make choices about the working hours, they feel like they're choosing not to be with their children. And that is a really difficult thing to do.
It's a real thing,
because society sort of says,
it's really difficult.
Yeah.
I struggle with it all the time.
So yes, that was probably my first taste of mum guilt.
It sounds like you've been in survival mode for so long.
Yeah. When I wasn't, I was like, ooh, what's the next disaster?
Oh God, yeah. And to go back to your mom, remembering the way she struggled with mental health, is it something you were ever scared of experiencing yourself?
So again, if I'm really truly honest, it was probably something that I grew up with a big hostility towards, and I saw it as a weakness when I was younger. And when I was young, I'm going to say probably even into my late 20s, I probably thought that people who had mental health issues were a bit indulgent. And you're probably not supposed to say that out loud, but that is...
No, I get that. It's a lot of people from that time, actually, they're more like, let's get on with it, like I was talking with my partner about it recently. He also always thought that depression was pathetic.
Yeah.
He changed his mind now, but that was the mindset. Yeah.
And I think that when you're a child on the receiving end of somebody who really struggles, you can feel quite angry about it, and you feel like, because I would look at my own children and I'd think, well, yeah, I'm tired. Yeah, this week's been really difficult, but I'm still going to bring my best for you, because that's what you do. And so I found it really difficult. I felt really let down that somebody would almost like indulge in that whatever it was that was going on in their own heads, when actually there's people around you that need you and that you haven't been there. I think then what happens, it's not through my own direct experiences, because I consider myself to be nothing other than very fortunate, but you have other people that are close to you that have struggled with their mental health. And when
Like
you
your siblings?
not necessarily my siblings, but even my own children, or very close friends. So one of the friends that I mentioned earlier, she's had severe struggles with depression for a really long time, and almost that distance of it not being a mother-child relationship allows you to be a bit more generous of spirit about how you perceive it, and be a bit more
Definitely.
empathetic,
Yeah.
because it's someone
You're not in the
that
middle of it
you're not
then.
in the middle of it. And so I've definitely gone on a journey, and then your own children, especially growing up in a world like today,
Yes.
where there's just so many different pressures, and that is a very humbling experience. That
Would you say that you have more empathy for it now?
100%, 100%. But yeah, I mean, it's not been something that I've ever kind of sat and worried. I mean, I think a lot. Like, people that are close to me will say I never stop thinking, and I'm always planning things ahead. So, and I also, the way that my brain works, I'll think of all the different eventualities of things that might happen. So if I do this, it could go down this route, it could go down that route. And I'm very good at kind of working my way through and strategizing and whatever. But what I never do is I don't disaster plan for things that haven't happened. So I don't sit there and think like, oh, well, I could struggle with my mental health, or this might happen because that happened to my mum, or this might happen because that happened to my dad.
You're not a worrier, basically.
I'm not a worrier. I'm a thinker, not a worrier. It's a thin line.
It is, though.
It is, yeah. Oh, dear.
You were telling me before about the anger you had towards your mom at the beginning. As a teenager, basically, you don't yet have the tools to kind of understand what to do with certain emotions. What were you doing with that anger?
Probably it was something that actually united the rest of us in the family at the time, which is, I'm not saying that that's a positive thing, but I almost think that having a common enemy sometimes is something that can bring people together. And so, it was probably something that, with maybe my siblings, and certainly with my grandma and my dad, you were allowed to express that anger more than you're allowed to express being upset. And by express, I don't mean I'm not a shouter. I grew up in a house of people that kind of like, in my view, were like hysterical at points, and it's not my style. I'm a very calm person, but it would be like, isn't it just ridiculous that this has happened? And and then you'd be met with, yes, yeah, it is. Whereas if I'd have said like, oh, I'm really upset, it would be like, come on, like, pull yourself together.
Yeah.
So it was kind of okay to
just talk about it, not self-indulging.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes sense. The anger you felt at the time towards your mom as well, is it something that you had to deal with in a later stage of your life as well?
The answer is yes, but I would really struggle to articulate to you like how you go about, or even my own personal journey on how you deal with that. I think what I realised, and probably time and distance are great healers. So, she was away from me. She was away from me for a very long time, and, hasn't been a massive part of my life. And with the benefit of distance and maturity and perspective, I can see that it wasn't all her fault. She needed help, and I'm kind of okay with that. And so I think where I got to, it certainly for a long period of time, it is, she is who she is, and I've got a choice to accept that, or to be angry and bitter about it.
Yeah,
and
two ways,
I just accept it, and that doesn't mean that I'm trying to put rose-tinted glasses on it and say that it's something that it isn't. It is what it is. The childhood is what it is. Our relationship today is what it is, which actually is absolutely fine. But you have got a choice. I could look back at my childhood, and lots of people would say, well, you were neglected and you were forced to be a carer at a very young age, and you experienced adult themes like, and I could be like, oh, woe is me, isn't it awful? Actually, my mum did love me. She tried her absolute best in the midst of dealing with her own mental health. does that change the fact that at a time it was a disaster for me?
Yeah.
No, it was awful. It was really
of
awful.
course.
But she did her best, and I genuinely believe still to this day she loves me. She's proud of me. She's got no idea what I do. We always have this joke. She's like, yeah, she sort of does something, but you know, she is really proud of me. And
amazing that you can still feel that.
Yeah, and we're not going to be like you've seen me with Kate. You know, we're so close.
Yeah.
We're not going to be like me and Kate are. But that's okay. And when I see her, I enjoy seeing her, and she's included, and you know, and it is okay as it is. Not every relationship has to be, you know, the best
No, of course not.
in the whole entire world. I would just say that I've come to accept things as what they are.
Did it challenge your sense of safety?
I think my dad and my grandma made me feel safe. So I was kind of lucky in that regard. But it definitely, as I became a parent and as I got to the age where my children were the age that, you know, I'd been when she left, and you kind of go through a lot of emotions about that, because I could see how needy my own children were. And it's like, oh my God, like I couldn't imagine being away from them. But actually maybe it was a good thing that she did, because, you know, she wasn't really coping very well.
Yeah, otherwise maybe she would have had more effect on you.
Yeah, and I don't know, I sort of go back to, fundamentally, I am quite a positive person, and I think you've got a choice. Like every day you can choose to wake up and be a victim of the things that have happened before, and to expect the world to give you something, or to be angry about things, or to be bitter and negative, and to judge yourself against other people, or to gossip. You know, you can choose to do all of those things. Definitely. Or you can just accept that we're all on different paths and different journeys, and you can choose to control the only thing you can control, which is what you put into the world. And I think, again, the older that I've got, the more acutely aware I've become of what I put back into the world, and I try and make a choice for that to be something that's positive. And
at the end, a lot of these feelings are punishment to the self, aren't they?
Yeah. You know, I'm in a much better place for having a nicer relationship with my mum, and, you know, being able to, I mean, they were teasing me. So she weirdly, we used to go to the zoo all the time. We're from Chester. There's a big zoo in Chester. And she used to always be obsessed with these capybaras. And I saw a cuddly toy capybara the other day, randomly, never seen one before. I was like, I'm going to buy that for my mum, you know, and I sort of FaceTimed her and was like, Mum, I've got you a capybara. You know, you can choose to be positive about things and think, you know what, that was a great childhood memory. Going to the zoo as a family, that was a great childhood memory. I've seen something that reminds me of it. I'm going to enjoy that moment. You don't have to constantly let some negative things that have happened take away all your good memories. And I think if you do, the only person that you are damaging is yourself.
Do they appear sometimes, negative thoughts?
No, look, right. Do negative thoughts appear?
Yes.
100%.
Okay,
yes.
great.
Everybody has negative thoughts all the time. I'm no different. You have negative thoughts. Do I look back on my childhood and think negative things about it? No. So I suppose, again, it's a long time ago, like I'm 40, you know, over 40. So you look back much more dispassionately, and I can see that there was good. I can also see that there was negative. It's not something that I dwell on. If somebody asks me a question about it, I'll give them an honest answer. It wasn't perfect all the time, but I don't ever kind of sit there and lie awake at night thinking about my childhood, or you know, I've got my own life. I've got so much that's positive and so much that I'm grateful for, that it's not something that I dwell on.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then after you've achieved so much, you came to a point that you basically didn't need it to work and everything was okay. Could you still enjoy just doing nothing?
No. I'm not a nothing person.
I had a sense already.
No, I'm not a nothing person. I just think you get one life, and one of the things I remember, it was years and years and years and years ago, and it was when I was going through the partnership process to become a partner in one of the big 4 firms, as you mentioned. And a guy who was my mentor is an incredible individual. And he said to me, Victoria said, I just want you to just stop for a minute and look at that door. So I looked at the door, and it was a door that went from outside inside, but it was kind of like a back door that the staff used. And a few people kept coming in and out, and I'm kind of like looking at it, kind of thinking, yeah, what am I looking at? And he said, what are your thoughts? And I was kind of like, I'm obviously supposed to see some deeper meaning here, and I don't see it. And I said, I don't know, what am I supposed to be seeing? And he said, look, he said, once you're through to the other side, he said, every single person that comes through that door, indirectly, they work for you. This business thrives based on how successful you are going out into the market and doing the things that you're doing. But they are all looking at you as somebody that's senior in this business. So if you set the standard of how we treat each other, if you set the standard of the quality of what we do, that's the standard. And if you let people treat you differently, if you let something slide when somebody's a bit disrespectful, or you let, whatever, you're setting that lower standard for them. And it was a real, like...
Did it change something in you?
It changed something, completely changed something, because what happens when you're in a large professional environment is, with all the right intentions, but you become very single-minded on, what does this career mean for me? When's my next promotion? When's my next pay rise? When's my next kind of title change? What's my next responsibility? And you're on this like path, and don't get me wrong, it's a great path and it's an amazing privilege to be able to go on the journey, but it's all about...
Tags along with the laser focus you had, right?
It's that laser focused all the way through. And what you realise when you get through the other side is now you're a leader. And you get the job title.
It's already in the name, actually. A leader.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, actually, what kind of leader do you want to be? Because you can be somebody that is the boss because you've got the job title, but people don't really respect you. You don't really inspire
You still need to earn your respect.
Exactly. And that really began, I think, what has been the most enjoyable phase of my career, which is spending time thinking about other people more than I think about myself. And that 100% is a privilege to be able to get to a position. I think the biggest joy for me with Amello is going to an all-girls school and being very academic. I remember going and picking what I was going to do for my A-levels, and it was like a bit of a pitching meeting where every single subject, they were like, Victoria really should do fill in the blank of whichever teacher it happened to be. And then the year head at the time of sixth form said, look, Victoria, lots of girls can get an A in English literature or, whatever it happens to be. Not many can get great grades in sciences. And if you do sciences, it will really set you apart, and it will show that you're kind of academically really bright and all the rest of it. So I sort of got funneled down this very academic route, but actually I've always loved creative things.
And so it wasn't out of passion that you went that way?
No, it was out of real, guidance of, like, not many girls do this, and almost even a little bit of pressure that you felt like, well, I can, so I should, and it would be a waste. And I remember my grandma, who's full of loads of really good advice, but she was like, you really should do mathematics. You really should do mathematics. I was like, okay, I'll do mathematics. And so now I tell everybody not to do mathematics. I'm like, it's really hard. My son's done maths and further maths, but it comes really naturally to him. But I really felt the pressure, I think, to go down that route, and then you go down it, and as I said, it then becomes this path, and it's like the steam train. Being in Amello is so creative, and we laugh because I'm used to giving people really clear instructions about the law and about tax legislation and and they give something to me in a report, and I get my red pen out and I'm like, do you understand why this is wrong and this is right, and 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 it is kind of like having your homework marked. In Amello, it's like, let's put together an inspiration board. Like, what's the inspiration behind the autumn-winter collection for 2026?
Can't be more different, can it?
It's so different, and the way people communicate is different.
Does it make you nervous?
I tell you, so it's not makes me nervous, but it's definitely been interesting to be in an environment where I'm not the expert. Because, you know, if you think about what it takes to build a business, you need to set up a website, which sounds really easy, but to kind of set up a proper, you know, e-com platform is challenging. You need to have a tech stack. You need to design clothes. You need to make clothes. You need to, you know, all these kind of different things. And none of them are my fastball. So, you know,
of course it was different with accounting.
100%. Like, I knew what I was
Makes
doing.
sense.
And
now
so,
you're a proper entrepreneur.
Yeah.
My last question.
Yeah.
What do you wish the world knows about teenage moms? If you have to set the record straight.
Yeah, I love that as a question. You know, I would say that teenage mums are probably the category of people that are most full of potential. You know, they, you said at the beginning that you become a mum before you really know who you are yourself.
Absolutely.
And everything is a possibility for you, and everything is a possibility for your child. And so if you meet somebody and, you know, because of your own assumptions or, you know, you assume that they're not going to go and do amazing things, you're really, really missing the vast majority of their story because they've only been there for a tiny bit. You know, there's a great thing, which I think is a good message for anybody to hear, which is, you never ever judge yourself against somebody else, because, you know, you might be judging yourself against somebody who looks like they've got it all together, and, you know, they can be like at a different point in the story at a time when you're just beginning or when you're just reinventing yourself. Every single teenage mum is just beginning. And I think that if you take the time to, you know, be there for them, support them, like some of my friends did, like my grandma did. You know, my close friend who I mentioned earlier, she was at the launch of Amello just recently, and she kind of like had tears in her eyes, and she was like, I was part of that journey, and she was, because had she not helped me with the childcare,
it's almost like her success.
Yeah,
isn't it?
and like, what a great feeling.
Yeah.
You know, there isn't enough success of your own to make you happy every day, but if you start taking joy in helping other people,
Absolutely.
It's a surefire way to make you happy. Yeah.
Perfect, beautiful answer. I'm in tears. Thank you so much for coming. It was
You're
such a
welcome.
pleasure.
Thank
It was
you.
really, really lovely.